Welcome to the Predictable Revenue Podcast, where frontline sales leaders teach you how to build and scale an outbound sales team. Welcome, everybody. We're going to give everyone just another minute or two to jump in here, and then we're going to get rocking and rolling. But while we're here, I want everybody to say hello, jump into that chat. Tell me your name, tell me where you're from, and we'll just start with some shout outs while we're waiting for everybody to onboard here. I'm going to be a good host. I'm going to remember to mute my phone this time so I don't have my pocket exploding. All right, Brian from Vegas. Nice. Thanks for joining us, Brian. Graham from LA, Jonathan from South Carolina, Kelly from Brooklyn. Nice to have you here. All right, Chris from Boston.
Whoa.
Pete, the original Jersey. Nice. The original Jersey being the island. Interesting. Hey, Joe from Edinburgh. I know I'm pronouncing that wrong, and I will try and figure out how to say that correctly at some point, but I'm doing my best. Yeah, Aaron, my co-founder, Aaron's actually moving there in January. They found a nice house a little bit outside the city. Man, people are staying up late for this one. We got some people in here from Amsterdam, from Manchester. Leon, are you a U fan or a City fan?
Neither.
Fair. Josh from Phoenix, Arizona. Nice. All right. Well, I say we let's get this started here. So my name's Collin. I'm one of the founders over here at Predictable Revenue, host of the Predictable Revenue podcast. We're probably also going to throw this on the podcast, so shout out to all the listeners. With me today, I've got Jeroen Corthout. Yep. And I know I can't roll that R, so I apologize. Co-founder and CEO over at SalesFlare. Jeroen, how you doing today, bud?
I'm doing well. Yourself?
I'm great, man. I'm just on like the tail end of a cold, so I've got this like raspy voice. So I apologize if you hear me muting and ducking for cover.
It sounds good.
Cool. Three things we're going to cover today. We're going to talk a little bit about how, as founders, that we can help you, just a bit of a background on our experience. We're going to talk about where Jeroen's first 100 customers came from, and then we're going to talk about where my first 100 customers came from. Perfect. So a little bit about how we can help you guys. So I'm a founder of Bootstrap Predictable Revenue from 0 to 5 million, host of the Predictable Revenue podcast, been a salesperson, sales leader, first sales hire for 3 companies, taking them 0 to a million in sales. I've sold everything from cell phones to diesel, like cell phone contracts when I was in high school, to diesel generators, to mines and data centers, to specialty welding equipment, and a whole bunch of weird and crazy stuff in between. More recently, Predictable Revenue is helping companies build remote sales teams. We've got a nice office in Cancun, great sales talent down there, and we've been trying to basically help all the good people down there. We're teaching them how to be SDRs and then helping them find jobs prospecting into the US. Jeroen, why don't we tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah. Hello. I'm a co-founder and CEO of SalesFlare. SalesFlare is an easy and automated CRM for small businesses. That means it's not in any case like Salesforce. It's really a sales CRM. And what sets us apart from other ones is that ours is way more automated, so you don't need to spend that much time to keep it up to date. It just pulls the information from where it already is. And my background previously was mainly in helping companies change sort of their go-to-market strategy, going from the more traditional ways of doing sales, and that was a lot with pharma companies, to approaching things in a modern marketing, sales, digital way with CRM behind it and all that. And like you have on the slide, I also have a podcast. It's called Founder Coffee, on which I interview proven founders from SaaS companies mostly on the personal side of business. So not so much on little strategies or anything, but really discovering the person behind the company every time.
Awesome, man. That's really cool. I kind of do the opposite with my podcast. We don't really talk about the people as much. It's mostly about the tactics.
That's good.
Cool.
Complementary.
Totally different styles. All right, so we get the agenda in there a second time just because. So we're going to jump into where SalesFlare's first 100 customers came from.
Yeah.
All right, man. So how did you guys start getting the word out?
I can run you through this. It's a bit of a long story. There's a bunch of slides about it, but I think where it all started out for us very early on, it was this very naive idea that products were launched in the press, and this was kind of what mattered. Of course, I didn't really go into that, but before that, we had done sales before because we had a software company. It's called Explore Plus. It was a business intelligence software company, and it was quite sales heavy. And that's actually where SalesFlare originated, because we had a lot of leads to follow up there. But with SalesFlare, we wanted to do that a bit differently, and we wanted to go beyond like the normal sales kind of strategy by launching big in the press. And we thought that with one boom, kind of we would be known and customers would start coming in. That was the idea. And I think we had this idea because that's what we mostly saw happening. So we saw a lot of startups and products launching through the press, which always seemed like such a defining moment. And that's why, like very early on, and I'm talking 2014, beginning of 2014, we had this very double approach of going about things. So on the one hand, we were having our sales approach where we had developed a prototype and would hit the road with it and evangelize to everyone who wanted to listen. But on the other hand, we were trying to make this kind of big press hit happen. And that's also why very early on, we invested a lot of time in creating something simpler and catchier than a CRM, because we thought it would be very hard to launch a CRM in the press, which was true, I think. So we created DocFlare. It was a sort of a feature of SalesFlare that we lifted out, and we wanted to use that as an entry port to our system, a kind of lead magnet, or I actually found out by now it's called engineering as marketing. That's how it's called in the book Traction.
Yep.
Gabriel Weinberg. Sometimes people call it side project marketing. But for us, it was a clever hack to get some attention, and it did help us in some ways. It got us easily into an incubator and an accelerator, as people thought that we already had a lot of stuff, and it brought us some early network because we had some people using it. But if I would look back at it right now, it's probably something we shouldn't have done. It was some sort of unnecessary detour because of our naivete.
I mean, in fairness, like we're trying to start, and you just kind of start something. Like I also started a CRM company, and I just went out and I sold something, and I just had, I don't know, I had some screenshots that we photoshopped.
Yeah.
That obviously didn't work out because I'm not standing here as CEO of a CRM company. So no judgment. We're just trying to just trying to do something, trying to make something happen.
True. Yeah. And that's maybe a good, switch to the next thing we did.
Yeah.
If you can switch slides.
And Jonathan was just asking as I switch here, what do you mean by getting in the press? Like, are you talking about
getting press coverage? Like
PR coverage, reaching out to journalists,
like
that sort of thing.
TechCrunch would say, SalesFlare, they're building this new CRM, and it's automating everything. It's so amazing. That kind of press coverage.
Gotcha. And that's a pretty documented process. If you sort of Google, how do I reach out to TechCrunch? At some point, a couple of years ago, there was somebody that published a CSV of all of the tech journalists' email addresses.
Yeah, getting their email addresses is not difficult. Emailing them is not difficult. Getting some kind of story is not difficult. What's difficult is convincing them that something is noteworthy That's probably the most difficult thing. And yeah, that with a CRM, for instance, that is almost impossible unless you raise millions and millions. Then they might write about that, but otherwise they won't.
I ran into the same problem. We had local people writing about me, but the articles were more about me and not necessarily about the CRM company. And like, there aren't too many, or about the CRM. Like it was like, here's a founder that's doing something dumb. I mean, they weren't saying doing something dumb. I added that part. But you're right. Like, unless you're super unique or you tie it to something that's like a popular trend that's sort of taken over the world, it's not going to be interesting for a journalist to write about. You have to sort of put yourself in their shoes.
Yeah, we did get some coverage in local press, like very nice, and sort of we're in Belgium here, so you could say that the Financial Times of Belgium, we got covered a few times, and that was nice for the local community, and we got some customers from there in the end. But internationally, it's just almost impossible. If you think about tech press, it's just not feasible.
Totally. Sean just asked in the comments, when did I know it was time to pull the plug? Basically, we were 18 months in and we had one customer. I like to joke that we had hockey stick growth, but the hockey stick was facing the wrong way. So it was like up and then it just sort of flattened out.
So. I must say it took us, for the first customer, about 18 months as well. I think 17 months actually.
Nice. Yeah, we had one right from the get-go.
Yeah.
And then we kept iterating and we couldn't close another one.
Okay.
I was like, okay, time to do something different.
Yeah.
Perfect. All right.
I'll switch to the second thing we did.
Let's get there.
And this is what I would actually do if I would do it all over again. This was kind of triggered by the accelerator we entered that I mentioned earlier. We took kind of a step back there. We had done all these things around SalesFlare and then trying to get in the press and everything. But then we were like, okay, this SalesFlare thing was fun, but we really need to get SalesFlare going. And what they prescribed in the accelerator was doing customer interviews. And I would recommend that to everyone now. And what I did was I started from my own personal network. And from some of the connections we also got through SalesFlare. But I fired up Streak CRM, which is what I was using before SalesFlare was ready. Yeah. And I created sort of my very first pipeline. And it was a pipeline with customer interviews. And I would really recommend doing that, first of all, because these customer interviews are, if you do the right amount of them, and I mean like at least 20 to 40, you need to get organized. But also customer interviews are kind of the beginning of a sales process, because you're interviewing people about their issues and how they would like to solve them. And then obviously you're going to make the product in a certain way based on that, because you've learned what they want to solve. So
just to build on that, Ruben was asking, what do the customer interviews entail?
Yeah.
I can tell you what they don't entail, because when I started this for my CRM company, it was basically, I had this idea and I went to customers. I was thinking, hey, this is customer validation, right? I've got this idea. Yeah. I'm going to them. I'm trying to get them to tell me I'm smart and my idea is right. And that was, for me, that was the wrong way. I had a similar journey in that when we first, and I'll skip my section at the end here, because this is what I was going to talk about as well. But starting with customer interviews, where you're saying, open it up, right? We want to talk about sales. So we narrow in on, we're talking about sales. We're talking about this sort of pain point, this responsibility or this job to be done. And then ask like, so when you're trying to do this job, what's the friction? What's getting in your way? What do you struggle with? Right. And not leading them to, hey, buy my stuff. That was the thing that I struggle with coming from a sales background, is product, the sort of customer discovery, customer interview process and the sales process are very, very similar. You're digging for pain. But when I was thinking of it through the sales mindset, it was like I was a pain. And once I found that pain, I was attaching on, right? And just like, okay, now go for the close. And I mean, that's how we got our first customer unintentionally, intentionally. It just kind of happened that way. But really it's starting from, and I'd love to hear your experience, but starting from here's the sort of area we're talking about, then how do we pull out what's relevant, and how do I pull out the relevant pains and challenges that you're actually experiencing instead of leading them to, this is the thing I want to talk about.
Yeah, no, I fully agree. You mentioned jobs to be done. I didn't use that back then, but that's what I would use if I do it all over again. I've recently been reading Competing Against Luck by Clayton Christensen. I've been reading the little handbook by Bob Moesta and his colleague, Chris B. About
is that When Coffee Meets Kale or something like that?
No, it's the Jobs to be Done handbook.
Oh, okay.
Coffee Meets Kale is by another guy. It's a bit more complex, I've been told. It follows a sort of same philosophy. Jobs to be done as progress, not as activities.
Exactly.
So the correct jobs to be done. But it's a long and complex book. I'd really recommend Clayton Christensen as an introduction. With Competing Against Luck. Check
out his milkshake video. I'll while you're talking about the next point, I'll find it and I'll throw a link in the show notes here. Or in the comments.
The best intro to it. That's something he did together with Bob, who I mentioned also. Bob from the Rewired group. They are very experienced in the way you do these kind of interviews. And actually at this very moment, I'm doing this kind of interviews again with our top customers. So I've taken our top 40 customers and I'm redoing all the interviews to really understand the jobs we're doing for them in detail.
That's super interesting. We did that earlier this year, and it actually helped us uncover some new products and services, as well as like fully pivot away from one service that just wasn't serving customers really well.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Going back to the customer interviews, perhaps, or shall I continue with that? I get some questions about AppSumo or Product Hunt, but we can get into that later when that comes up.
Yeah, I'm going to throw a link for a book that helped me because I hear looks like Boris is struggling with this right now. I liked Competing Against Luck. I found it kind of fluffy. I was like, okay, it feels like the milkshake video, but just in 400 pages. But that's me. I like things that are super tactical. Obviously, if you listen to the podcast, like that's the whole podcast is like, just teach me the nuts and bolts of things. But the Lean Product Playbook was basically, here's all the tactical things you need to do, step by step by step, chapter by chapter. So if you're listening and you're struggling with that specific piece, jump in there. Cool. And I throw a link to that book in the chat here. Sorry, and I'll let Jeroen get back to it.
I'll check the book as well. The practical book I checked was the one of Bob, the Jobs to be Done handbook, but I didn't know the Lean Product Playbook.
Yeah, Lean Product Playbook is I think it talks a little bit about jobs to be done. It's got there's a shout out to some of the original guys that started doing that when they were building not QuickBooks. It's Scott. Anyway. Intuit. When they were building, I think it was Intuit and QuickBooks and all that. But they talk about those early stories. TurboTax. Yeah, that must have been it. Yeah, that was totally it. And they tell sort of the story there, and then they layer in, here's the tactical stuff. The other great one I read on that subject was How to Create Products Customers Love, Marty Kagan.
Okay.
But anyway, I'll stop interrupting you and let you get back to your next slide here.
Yeah. I was still talking about customer interviews. Is there anything I still want to share about that? I think I was talking about that it's good to organize yourself. Because then afterwards you can use these people to sell to. Also good to keep in mind is that it's good to kind of compile your audience in the right way. So what I did was getting from CEOs and VPs of sales to salespeople themselves to really understand the different players there. And because we didn't really know who our best type of customer would be, I had an idea, kind of. We also got different types of companies there, so that we could see where what we had in mind would align best. And then I had this standard set of questions that I asked. Now I have a different one, more based on jobs to be done. Also combined a bit with the book Obviously Awesome by April Dunford. I mean, it's also kind of jobs to be done, but then for positioning.
Can you tell me about that book? She's a mentor of somebody who used to work here and a good friend of mine, Krista. And she actually sent me a pre-release copy of the book, and it's been sitting on my desk, and I haven't had a chance to get to it yet. So tell us.
It's a very nice book, very easy to apply, in the sense that it's written to do something practical. What I kind of missed in there, and I told April as well, is the questions you need to ask when you do an interview. And I asked her, and she said, well, I used to do interviews for companies, but then they said that their sales teams and customer support teams already knew all these things. So she stopped doing the interviews, and that's why there's no interview questions in the book. But I thought for us, it was still very useful to ask these questions explicitly and go through it. Even if other companies don't always find it useful, I do find it useful.
Right on.
Maybe one thing to mention about customer interviews, something that went a bit wrong for us, is when you're interviewing people, every single person will kind of have a different view on things. And the danger is that you'll try to appeal to everyone and create something that covers the needs of everyone. This is dangerous for your product development. For defining the MVP, it becomes all fuzzy, but also for your marketing messaging. So our marketing messaging was fuzzy for a few months, and nobody still understood what we were doing. And then at some point, I just had to go back and say, okay, we started building SalesFlare because it's very difficult to use a CRM and to put the data in it. That's where we're going back. But because of the pressure of all talking with all these people, it was fuzzy for a while. So I'd really keep that into account when you're processing all that information, which can seem overwhelming. Yeah, that would be my main feedback, my main advice when doing this.
Cool. And Jonathan was asking, could you share some of the questions that you were asking your customers?
Yeah, let me fire them up here. I have it open because I've been doing these interviews all day today.
Cool.
Well, it's a lot of questions. I can perhaps share some of those afterwards with the listeners, but it starts from what were you using before you bought SalesFlare? Were you also invited in buying that? All the details around it, how that was working, and all these kind of things, to then sort of investigate the four forces. There's four forces working on switching products, because you're mostly switching from something. Even if people were not using any CRM before SalesFlare, it was Google Sheets, right, or something else. So there's the inertia of the solution, like something that keeps them on it, and then there's the push from there. So like what made that you kept using the Google Sheets until that moment, and then there's why did you start searching for a new solution. And then in the other direction, you have the pull of a new thing. So what I ask is, before you made the purchase, how did you imagine life would be better with SalesFlare? And there's also sort of the anxiety of getting on something new. That's also there, and that's what almost stopped you from using SalesFlare. Did you have any concerns, any habits you had to change, any features that seemed missing? And like that, you can very nicely map the feelings that surround a switching of products. But this is just the switch. To investigate the jobs, I ask things later of like, what do you and your team use SalesFlare for on a daily basis? And then go into how we actually make these things easier than others. But it's a very long list of questions. If interesting, I could maybe package them up and share them after this webinar.
Perfect. I just threw a link into the chat there with a Google Doc with the types of questions that we asked. Cool. And basically, we had sort of 3 questions. First, really focused on the sort of customer attributes. Second, were like really open-ended questions to understand the sort of progress that they valued most. And then the third really sort of triangulated in on like how happy you are with each. And so basically, and this comes out of the Lean Product Playbook. And basically, there's 2 questions that you ask, and I'm just trying to remember how to frame it, which is basically you narrow in on a job to be done, and then you say, okay, well, on a scale of like 1 to 10, how important is that sort of job to you, right? And then what helps you like and then the piece that helps you map how much pain there is how satisfied are you with your current implementation or your current solution to that pain or to that job to be done. And so for us, there were some things that were internal, like that we were already doing for our customers that we were mapping that way. And when I say mapping, I mean, it allows you to sort of graph like a rectangle, or you can graph it out. And so that you can show you can plot out all of the different sort of jobs to be done and your customers' satisfaction. And then essentially, if you look at the area of each, those are your biggest opportunities.
Yeah.
Cool.
Checking out your document. Looks good.
Man, 34 people in that doc. That's the most I've seen in a Google Doc at one point. Yeah, Giovanni's asking, is this a 1 hour session? This is a 1 hour session. We'll try and get back on track, because I know we got a little bit distracted here.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Indeed. So let's get back into.
I'll go a bit quicker.
Yeah, for sure.
After the customer interviews, we built an MVP, get feedback from users. That's really important. Our main focus at that point was to get people to use what we built and to actually get value from it, up till the point that we could start charging them for it. Some people think it's a good idea to immediately have people pay for it. If that's possible, sure, but you first need to make sure, of course, that you create the necessary value, because otherwise nobody's gonna pay you. And if you really how can I say, only go forward if they pay you, then that might block you from creating something that is valuable. And then our very first customers, they actually came through the press, so it kind of worked. They read about something that would help them finally have a CRM that would be used, because it would do a lot of the work for their salespeople, and they didn't have to use it. Our very first customers came from Microsoft Dynamics, actually. And they weren't using it. And then the next ones, the second customer, they didn't have anything before, so it's kind of different. But it took us quite a while to get our first customers, because there's so many expectations around the CRM system. That's why it took us 17 months. It's a CRM needs to do a lot of things before people are willing to pay for it. So that took an enormous amount of time.
Yeah, and people's expectations for what should be in a CRM are enormous.
Yeah, I didn't know that when we started, but
yeah.
And then the next step for us was starting to go to events, and that's because we kind of exhausted our network. And then something I failed to mention when talking about the customer interviews, at the end of each interview, I would also ask for 3 people that according to them would be relevant to do this customer interview with as well. And that way I kind of expanded from my network to their network, and actually got a lot of maybe even more relevant people to talk to than in my direct network, because these people found them relevant. So But when we started going to events, the nice thing with events is that you can see people in real life and build a real life connection with them. You don't have to do it all online and to whatever, which creates trust. And this is also how we then got to, I think, from around 10 to around 20, 30 customers. We closed Udacity, for instance, like that. We had the department of Udacity called Blitz. We met them at TechCrunch Disrupt in San Francisco in 2016. And yeah, one thing I would say, we go to startup conferences, but as a startup, you don't necessarily go to startup conferences. If your customers are at a real estate event, then by all means go to a real estate event. Events are not really super scalable, so that might be why some people want to skip it, and it's not cheap either. But as a small company, there's a lot of ways you can get to conferences cheaper. So, but the good thing is that you can make real strong connections, and often.
Most startups or most events, especially if they're startup minded, they will let you in for a discount or almost free if you email them and say, hey, we're new. And, we're just launching this. We haven't raised any money, or we've only raised a little bit of money. Can you help us out with a discount ticket or this or that? We're just here to have some conversations.
Yeah, definitely. Or there's even, there's some people that can get you free tickets sometimes, or
sure.
Sometimes I'm a speaker, sometimes an influencer, whatever. Anything that makes it cheaper.
Exactly.
What was the time frame to go from 10 to 20? A few months. I don't remember exactly. Month or 4, I think. It started speeding up quicker and quicker. To go from 1 to 10 took a while. I remember customer 12, we were really happy. But then it started going faster and faster. Especially, and then the process to connect with people at events. This was the same person who asked to make it 1 hour, right? The process to connect with people at events. We have a very strict process. It's basically, it's simple. Before the event, finding people to connect with at the event, booking as many meetings as possible during the event, and then very nicely following up after the event. This is the simple way of explaining it, because of course it involves a lot of small steps in terms of logistics. You need to book the meetings all in one system where it works. You need to put everything neatly in the CRM. We use SalesFlare for that. And then the follow-up goes also from there. And then we actually use one pipeline, which then branches into other pipelines in the end, because there's many types of partnerships we do now at conferences. We don't really go for customers anymore, but for partnerships. Then there's questions around where did customers come from. I think around, let's say, from the first 20, 30, around half came from online, and then most of the other ones from events and some personal contacts, customer interviews, but relatively little from customer interviews. A sales rep is a sales representative. I'm answering the questions.
Perfect. So let's get to sort of how you develop the presence online.
Yeah. So right after that, we kind of built up some credibility. And we also went through the process many times manually. And I would get on video calls with everyone to fully onboard them and really go through it and not let it go from the start. But when everything started running smoothly and we had a self-service onboarding and all that, We also started going more online, and we would basically reproduce what we do at events somehow. We went where people would hang out, but then online. So for us, that meant Quora. A lot of people looking for CRMs on Quora because it ranked well in Google back then, at least. Reddit, there's quite a lot of people looking for new stuff. Facebook groups, there's very specific communities for very specific types of companies, so with specific topics where you can create content and network and all that. LinkedIn is always good. At least for us, it might be that your customers are somewhere else. Again, if you're in real estate, LinkedIn might not be the place to go. It all depends. For us, a lot of early growth came from Quora. For a while, we ranked number one on all the questions, but that's not sustainable because there's a lot of upvoting and downvoting on Quora, and it's always someone else at the top. It's sort of a crazy struggle. Facebook groups worked really well for us for creating some sort of hype and community around SalesFlare. And that was mainly because Gilles, who was working for us back then, he would create content pieces, not finished, share them with the group, ask for feedback, shared all these hacks, help people to do those, and it would always put the SalesFlare brand in the right picture. And all this sort of movement that we started creating then was really where we launched on Product Hunt from, you could say, which is the next point.
Perfect. And just before we jump in there, Jacob was curious, were you selling, because this is like a CRM, we're talking about like 30 to $50 per user per month kind of thing. Were you selling your first 10, 20 hand to hand, or was this all through partners? Was this all just generating the inbound and letting people come to the website and sign up?
It was all me. So yeah, it is not scalable, but it's just what you have to do to really understand the process very well. And if you don't do it manually, then I'm afraid it's very hard to start automating it somehow by creating it in a digital way.
It's also being involved in that feedback loop. Like even if it's not profitable long term,
it's much shorter.
Exactly. You're learning quite a bit more for those first 10 to 100, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Perfect. And so the next piece here that you talked about, and so just before we jump into the next two, what number of customers were you at when you moved from like started on the Quora and then moved to Sumo and things like that?
Product Hunt, we were probably around 30. AppSumo, we were probably around, I don't know, 70, 80. I don't know exactly.
How dare you not know the exact precise number?
Yeah, it's been a while. So back then I would certainly been able to tell you, but
yeah.
Okay. So Product Hunt, that's as soon as we kind of nailed the online game, like in the sense that I think people could sign up, and we knew it would work out. Like the onboarding was all working. So the nice thing, I talked about press earlier, how press didn't work for us. That's because, like I said, press is mostly interested in announcing funding rounds. I mean, that's what they cover. And Product Hunt is kind of replaced that, jumped in that gap. And it's a really nice place to find out about new cool products, much better than the press. It's not led by like journalists who decide what's noteworthy or not. It's really the end users that define this is cool. They upvote it, and then that's what you see every day on Product Hunt. So what we decided is that we would make the biggest Product Hunt launch a CRM had ever seen, and that worked out well. Currently, SalesFlare is still the first thing you find when you type CRM into Product Hunt. It took us about 2 weeks of preparation. We really did our best to do it very well. You can find all about that on our blog if you just type SalesFlare Product Hunt launch in Google. So I'm not going to go into details there, but it was a big day for us. I think we got around 250 trials in 2 days, which was big.
That's huge.
Compared to where we were at that point. So, and that page is still paying off. I still have people telling me like, oh, I was looking for a CRM and then I was on Product Hunt and I found you and the reviews all looked so great, and and they finally ended up with us. And it also helped us somehow to get ahead with AppSumo, and kind of take that next step again.
And so of those 250 signups, how many of them converted into customers?
25, 30, I don't know, somewhere around that.
10%, 20%, that's pretty strong.
Yeah, it's more around 10% for us. The thing with Product Hunt, though, I mean, to have a sort of the other side of the, I don't know how I say in English, the other side of things, is that it's early adopters, and they very quickly switch products. So if I look at the cohorts now, we had a lot of nice signups, but they're also churning quicker than normal signups.
Gotcha.
So it's the pros and cons.
That's fair. And so talk to us a little bit about what you're focusing on more recently now.
Yeah, there was still AppSumo I was going to...
all right.
Yeah, but shortly we did a deal on AppSumo. AppSumo is kind of like Product Hunt, but then different. People are not there to find out the newest upvoted products. It's AppSumo deciding and sending them lifetime software deals. Of course, AppSumo does their vetting. And for a small price, people then can get into products for life. We offered one user for free and the rest at 50% off. But the scale is so much bigger. So remember the 250 trials we got on Product Hunt, resulting in 25 customers. AppSumo was almost 6,000 signups, and not trials. This was actually people that paid money to be able to use SalesFlare.
Wow.
One-time payments, but still, I mean, they paid to use SalesFlare. And if you would look at how many of those are still using today, it's probably 1/4. So I don't think that's too bad.
That's pretty good.
So they basically blast to 1 million people. At least that's the numbers they share. And then these people decide whether to go for it or not. AppSumo gets a very large cut of the money also. So it all isn't a huge financial success, I would say. It's a nice cash injection, like one time, boom.
Yeah.
But then you also have to support people. And I don't mean have to support people, because we really take this to heart, I would say. All the feedback we get from the people that bought the deal on AppSumo is so valuable. We kind of got to scale thanks to AppSumo. It means we got a feedback at scale. We tested our systems at scale, which was kind of a challenge for a bit. We got word of mouth at scale, reviews at scale. So if you look at G2 or Capterra or so, this is also thanks to AppSumo that we actually got relatively more reviews than we have customers, let's say.
Right on.
So that was really, really good for us. I would do it again, but next time I would be a bit better prepared, I think. We kind of went into it a bit too lightly.
All right. So just managing our time here. We got about 15 minutes left. I want to leave a few minutes for questions, and I've got a couple of things from the growth of predictable revenue to share as well. So why don't we lightly touch on the next two pieces here? So what's working for you lately?
Lately, we've been moving from all the things I mentioned earlier to more like content marketing with a focus on SEO. I mentioned content marketing when I was talking about the Facebook community and all that. But then it was a bit more about getting people interested with what we were writing, like really excited. Now we focus a bit more on the long term. So we tried to marry these two things. We write with search engine readers in mind. So someone who looks for something, then finds your blog post and reads it. So sort of with search intent in mind. We do a lot of keyword research in Ahrefs mostly. So what we've been changing there recently also a bit more is that we involve SalesFlare more in posts. Try to showcase it a bit, so that it's sort of a certain topic, and then SalesFlare is used for that, so that people kind of also see SalesFlare more to make it convert better. Because otherwise, we're bringing people a lot of value without getting any conversions back. I would say it's also important to get the ball rolling. And then the thing we've been focusing on recently a bit more is networking and partnerships. So because we don't have a sales team, we don't go out there or anything. We rely on sort of inbound traffic. What's really important for us is that we build out a sort of network or community of raving fans and a solid network of partners to help us. So we've been upping our content marketing game on social media, like on LinkedIn. We started to be very conscious about building partnerships, and I have actually one colleague who's going to be full-time on partnerships soon. Like I said, we're interviewing our top 40 customers now to understand how we can serve them better. I'm taking some more time to speak at conferences, at events, and doing webinars like this one, which really helps to put us a bit closer to people, doing a bit more, let's say, quality work over quantity work, and always focused on building long-term value. Because I think somebody said this CRM space is crowded. How do you stand out with your content? We focus on writing real quality content. So nowadays, if for instance we organize a masterclass with a series of blog posts, I will have it written by an expert rather than a copywriter, so that it's actually decent content. But then there's this human aspect that we try to offer more and more as well. That's something that our big competitors cannot offer. If you go there, you're more sort of a number than a real friend or customer.
Yeah.
So that's where we try to differentiate.
Perfect. And keep the questions. Oh, yep. Sorry. I was just going to say, keep the questions coming, everybody. This is really good. And Joanna, with all the hard questions. Perfect. I know we got about 10 minutes left, so I'm gonna breeze through mine pretty quickly here. And Joanna, here comes the slide that I think you would really appreciate. And there's a link with a little bit more context coming. But basically, I'm going to take a few minutes and just talk about where did our first customers come from. And really, it was the Launch Academy, which is this co-working space that I was working out of. The short version of the story is spent 18 months working on a CRM system. I had this intern that I taught how to book meetings for me using the tactics from Predictable Revenue. And I was annoying everybody in the co-working space because I was always on the phone, and those tiny little phone booths they stick you into. I was just like, I've lived in those. And so I was just tired of being in a phone booth all day, every day. And so I started taking calls outside, and I was just annoying everybody. And one of the founders sat me down and said, I can't wait until you're working on something that you can be successful at. And it was like mean and cutting, and like also exactly what I needed to hear at the same time. But really that got me to open my eyes. And so I said, okay, well, I'll tell you what, we just spent 1.5 years building, and we had 2 engineers and an intern and a designer. I said, okay, well, before we write another line of code, I'm going to go find 5 paying customers. And if I don't find 5 paying customers, then we'll figure out what else to do. And off of that, I had basically it was, one of my buddies was like, hey, like I was working through my dilemma with him. And he's like, listen, like you guys are really good at booking meetings. Like you've got Jerry booking like 5 meetings a day for you. Like, could I pay you to do that for me? I was like, yeah, I could do that. And here's where like proper customer discovery should have come from. Like, if I was doing this right, I probably would have figured that out on my own and not had to luck into somebody asking me like openly, hey, do you have the ability to do this for me? But I think this is kind of the core difference for your early customers, is that it needs to be a pull. If trying to find new customers feels like pushing a wet noodle up a hill, you haven't really nailed that pain, right? Because you're trying to start something new. It should be innovative. It should be something that customers should be helping with a pain or a challenge that customers have never been able to solve before, right? And so if you're really just digging and finding resistance, then you haven't really nailed it yet. And that's what I found with the CRM company. And I found the opposite when we moved into sort of teaching people how to use predictable revenue to book meetings. And so initially it came from those early cohorts, those early people at Launch Academy. And really it was word of mouth from there. What we focused on was sort of the 10X product launch, which is basically you focus on finding your first 10 customers, then you focus on finding your first 100 customers, and then your first 1,000 customers, right? And so the first 10 came from customer interviews, and came from those me interviewing everybody. Because after my buddies asked me, then I said, okay, well, maybe I actually should go back and do some customer development on this. And so I was reaching out to other sales leaders. I was reaching out to sales thought leaders. That's how I met Aaron and probably every other sales thought leader in the space. But I was basically reaching out to pick their brain and trying to understand, right, if there was pain here. And from those interviews, I easily got my first 10 customers. And then here's the trick, is we did a really great job with those first 10 customers, and they referred us to our next 20 customers. Right. And so when we moved out of the sort of first 10 to next sort of 20, 30, really, they almost all came from customers. And it was referral. It was, hey, somebody heard I was doing something. It was just that, like, it was a combination of sort of like the network of people that I had known, because I'd spent 2 years here in this co-working space grinding away, people that knew me as the sales guy in this space that was typically filled with engineers and product people. They heard about, okay, you're solving this thing. That sounds great. And they were pulling me into their company. They said, hey, that sounds like something I need, or I know a friend who's struggling with this. And so to me, that was the best indication that, hey, we're really hitting onto something. And so those next 100, they really came from the sort of network and the customer referrals. And I'll just jump back a slide here. And basically Launch Academy, so that sort of network, word of mouth, and the customer referrals. And then I 100% cheated, and I merged with Aaron. The guy wrote the book. He had this book. He had this website. It was unreal. Before we had merged, we'd started like co-selling deals together, and he would just forward leads across, be like, hey, this person's asking about sort of what you do. And he used that as a way to test and see if we could actually sell, close, and provide value to customers. And it took us about 6 months, but eventually we sort of merged. And then all of a sudden, we made a couple tweaks to the website, and this is not the scalable, and this is not the the piece that everybody can replicate. But Aaron had done a tremendous job with his content marketing. He'd written a book, he had tons of blogs, he'd built strong traffic, and he had an email list of about 15 or 18,000. And in the early days, I remember it would basically, like, if we sent an email newsletter out, the next day or that night, leads would come in, and then a couple weeks later we would close deals. And so it was just this, like, on a week-to-week basis of send the newsletter, leads come in, deals close. And it was just this loop. And then when we really started wanting to go outside of that initial sort of list, we started stacking on outbound because it's something that we already knew how to do. We'd gotten away from it in the early days because we basically had, I think, 100 or 200 people emailing us every month. And so, it was really funny as an outbound company, we just didn't have time to get to all the inbounds. So we didn't get a chance to do outbound until we really got our feedback under us. But really those were sort of the channels, right? The first 10 came from our customers, those first 10 customers. The next 100 was sort of the network and customer referrals. And then the first 1,000, which I think we're still working on. I don't know if we've crossed over yet. We're basically sort of a mix of inbound and outbound for us. And I'm going to jump in and have a look at some of the questions now. Perfect. So I've got the link, or Jeroen shared that link. Perfect. Do we have?
I answered something else in the chat.
Yeah. So Oliver's asking, do you need to have the 100 via network in order to move forward? I mean, can you skip this approach? It really depends. Like, we probably weren't at 100 when we moved and started doing inbound and outbound, but we were selling, a couple $1,000 a month product, right? So if you're selling something that's $100 a month, your experience is going to be very different. But I think the piece that I feel like I see a lot of startups sort of skip is that customer validation step. Is that, okay, we built something, right? We sold our first couple, and we've got those sort of, out of those first 10, did you get 5 case studies, right? Or what's your success rate, right? Did you get an A+, where 10 out of 10 were successful, happy customers? Or were you 2 out of 10, where 8 out of 80% were unhappy, right? If you're that sort of 2 out of 10, you need to go back and iterate until you're getting a passing grade, right? And it doesn't have to be 10 out of 10 case studies, but I think it comes from the lean startup, where basically you survey your customers and say, like, how would you feel if our product didn't exist? Would you be meh, or would it be like very, very bad? And until you're getting everybody saying, life would be miserable if your product didn't exist, then that's that's where you want to start. So Joanna's got some questions here. I'm going to jump to them here. Anything you wish you had done or didn't do during launch in regards to mistakes? I think the one thing that I would like, if I was going to do it again next time, I don't regret anything because it got me here. And it's all like, you don't learn all this stuff unless you fuck it up, right? And so I'm happy with what we did and how we manage things. The next time I do things, just like Jeroen said earlier, I'm going to do a ton more customer development, customer research ahead of time. Jeroen, what do you think, bud?
Yeah, definitely agree. And the first time I just came up with some questions. This time I would do a lot more research into the questions. I kind of, I'm getting better at it already. The question you just mentioned, I also ask now during my interviews, like, how do you feel? And then people usually start laughing, and then they say miserable.
Yeah.
And then I say, oh, good.
Yeah.
If they don't, then you're like, okay, they're going to be gone at some point. You just know.
Yeah. And so we got a question here. How did you get prospective live customers to an interview? For me, I was reaching out to people on LinkedIn. I was cold emailing them. I actually got banned on LinkedIn 3 times in a week because I'd sent so many. I was just like copy paste monster, and I was just sending out all these invites, and I put like my message in the invite. And I got, basically, I think I sent out like 500 or 1,000 in a day period. I spent 8 hours grinding on LinkedIn, copy and pasting, and LinkedIn shut me down automatically because they thought I was a bot. And I think too many people hit like, this jerk is spamming me. And so there was like a automated unlock. So I went, okay, unlock. But what happened is only 10% of the people had seen the message. And so there were so many more. And so when those people saw, because I totally stopped, but I already sent 1,000 messages. So when the other like 800 people saw, they also clicked the same thing. So then I got banned a second time the very next day. And then I had to call in and like this and this and that. And so we got that sorted. And then I did it again the next month. And this time I called in and the guy's like, no, you're going to have to send us a letter. And so I actually had to write and mail a letter to LinkedIn apologizing. And and saying like, hey, I'm a real person, copy my driver's license. I'm not a bot. I'm just like a guy who's really good at copy paste.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it was not just from your network, it was also LinkedIn then, or?
Yeah, it was LinkedIn. I would use LinkedIn to navigate and find the right people. And then I would hit them up on LinkedIn and I would cold email them.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, like that's how I met Aaron and became part of Predictable Revenue, or a co-founder in Predictable Revenue. Is I cold emailed him, said, hey, can I interview you? Can I ask you some questions?
Makes sense.
Cool. We get a question from David here. When prospecting, did you encounter hunger with disbelief that your solution would work? And if yes, how did you tackle that disconnect in the mind of the prospect? So like sounds like it's the too good to be true. Like, oh, I didn't know you could do that. I mean, for me, the thing that helped was case studies. People are like, no, email doesn't work. I don't respond to emails. I don't respond to those types of emails. You're just annoying people. But I had customers, from those first 10 customers, I got a couple of case studies out of them. And I said, here's the numbers, here's what we did, here's the value that we provided and created. And when people would ask me those questions, I'd be able to just hand them the case study. Did you encounter that, Jeroen?
Yeah, we had a lot of that. And at first I was like, yeah, we're going to make this. And they're like, no, you're not going to, this is too complex. And I'm like, no, it's going to happen. And then there was no way I could convince them at that point because we didn't have it. So we just went back later and we said, look, it's here now. That's how we did it.
Yeah. Got a good question from Joanna. You're dealing with a tough audience, engineers, not too chatty. Any advice on, channels or tactics? I found email to be a terrible channel reaching engineers. I'm assuming we're talking about like software engineers. I don't have much experience with other types of engineers. Okay, software engineers. I find LinkedIn has been the best channel, and they are really adverse to a hard, strong ask of like going straight to booking the meeting. From my experience, an information share where you're like, hey, I saw that you're working on this space. I'm going to assume that you're doing X and you're experiencing Y pain. Here's an interesting thing that we wrote about that, or like, here's a case study, or not a case study because that's too deep down the funnel. I like that top of funnel. Here's how we solve that pain. Here's something that's, genuinely helpful. It's a really information rich first touch. Yeah.
We don't sell to engineers, but I would do it like that as well. If I think about my colleagues and the way they discover new stuff, that's exactly how. There's an issue and then they read about this really cool thing that might solve that. And maybe some other company used it and has written how they have done it. And then they jump on that and say, hey, we should do that.
Totally. And it's about the content that's like you were producing. It's not your marketing content, your 500 words, clickbaity stuff. This is like your long, deep content where it's, you've done some exploration into the metrics. You've done some interviews, you've done some research. There's like some real meat to it. And the longer stuff, they'll really dig in.
I can answer the mail track one very quickly, perhaps.
Yeah, jump in there.
Email tracking is not going to get you into the spam, and it just email tracking is not going to do it. It is a lot of things, the one after the other. So a spam filter doesn't say, oh, email tracking, that's spam. No, it's like you didn't set your DKIM and your SPF correctly. You used certain words. You didn't. I don't know. There's a whole list of rules that a spam filter checks for, and it adds up a score. And as soon as you pass the score, it's spam. So it's not just the email tracking, but the email tracking, of course, ups the score a little bit. So.
Yeah, I'll double plus on that one there. The way, from what we found, the way Google looks at it, it's if you're around 1 in 1,000 people are marking you as spam, then you're going to get flagged and your email deliverability is going to suffer. So the best way that you can combat that is making sure that you're sending fewer and more relevant emails with a softer ask. those like assumptive close, does Tuesday or Wednesday morning work better? They're more aggressive, and you're assuming that you know exactly who you're like, that you're emailing the exact right person that you should be talking to. Whereas more or less if you're going with like, hey, is this relevant to you? Right? Is this interesting? Are you struggling with this pain? Right? It's not a sales email, right? You're more asking about, right? Are you struggling with this pain? You're trying to triangulate, you're trying to find the people that are sort of in that pain or growth mode, the people that have already decided, hey, I need some help. I want to do something. A cold email isn't going to convince somebody that there is pain in their life. A cold email is going to happen upon somebody who is already experiencing pain, and is going to show them the light of your product and say, hey, this is a way to solve that problem. We got some questions about Gmail, Office 365. G Suite does not automatically set up SPF, DKIM, DMARC. There are amazing Google guides. If you Google search for G Suite, SPF, DKIM, DMARC, really easy guides to set those up.
And I would recommend G Suite over Office 365, just because the integrations are so much better. We have sort of an emailing thing in SalesFlare, which you can send campaigns, and the G Suite thing works so much better. For us, the API is much better to work with, and just also way more stable. And I'd really recommend always going for G Suite.
Yep. Yeah, and definitely not a dedicated IP.
No,
we've ran some tests on Amazon SES, and it was like 4 out of 1,000 got delivered. It was really, really bad. It also depends on the domain health and the length that your domain has been alive, and the reputation. Because what they're looking at is holistically, out of the 1,000 emails that your domain has sent, like how many of them were engaged with, right? They're looking for engagement responses. They're looking for people forwarding it on. They're looking for people clicking the links, right? And so if you're doing this from a dedicated IP that's new, that hasn't been warmed up, that isn't shared amongst other people, it's just you alone. And if you're doing cold emailing, it's not going to go well. If you're doing it off your main domain, I would recommend a really high quality approach, because you do run the risk of negative effects. Like there can be a downside if you're getting flagged as spam repeatedly off of your main domain, and that's more and more common. So, what do we think about creating a new domain? I like the idea if you have a really big newsletter. I would say make sure that you're following the appropriate process for warming it up. Using a domain that's been around for a while, you didn't just buy it today and started emailing on it tomorrow. Like actually using using it, sending emails back and forth internally so that Google sees that, hey, this is a real thing. If you're using G Suite, I think there's something about you automatically get blocked from sending if you don't prepay like $30 or $40. So that's one thing. Joanna said, check out your sender score, 100%. I would also look at mail-tester.com, so you can tell basically if your emails are going into spam or not.
There's also this kind of spam score testers for the score thing I was talking about earlier. I'm feeling we're talking a lot about outbound emailing.
Yeah.
You still have 2 slides, right? Yeah.
I got 2 slides left, but basically this is the sort of point of like, this is what it should feel like. We're not like grinding away and trying to push a rock up a hill, right? We're not trying to roll gold out of a pit mine. We're drilling for oil, and you either hit it or you don't. And when you really hit it, you hit it because all of a sudden you've got oil, right? And the analogy there is you've got oil. It's customers coming to you. All of a sudden there's this rush. And I remember really vividly it was November when we started with our first paying customers. And by December, it was sort of this like gold rush of customers that were coming to me, and I hadn't closed any of them. And I actually told the team I wouldn't close any customers in December, because we needed to build some software and catch up on things, because the way we were running it was just like scripts running out of Google Sheets, and it was unorganized chaos. My wife, not girlfriend at the time, but wife now, used to joke that I was the ghost of dirty dishes, because I would be at the office before she woke up and I would get home and she'd be in bed, and I'd get home, just eat some food and then fall asleep, and leave my dirty dishes everywhere because I was a jerk. But that feeling of like December, January, I just remember it was a blur. It was, for the first time, customers are coming to me and they were excited. They're like, oh, I can't believe you do this. I've got another friend who's struggling with this. And so it was that sort of network effect. It was that excitement that really drove it home for me. Perfect. Just want to recap the conversation here. We got some more questions. We can jump to them if everybody's got another 5 minutes. But basically, talk to customers and do not pass go. Do not collect $200 until you've talked to customers and you found that pain, right? Like Jeroen said, leverage your network, leverage their network. If you're doing great work and you're hitting on something that is a real huge pain point in their life, they're gonna refer you to other people. And then the last piece I would say is just find one channel and double down. If you're an early startup, you're trying to get your first 100 customers, don't try and be amazing at 5 different channels. Pick one channel that you know how to do, pick your one superpower, and then just double that, double down, double down, double down until you're seeing diminishing returns or nothing else is coming from that channel. And then go and find how to stack other channels on top of it. Any other closing thoughts, Jeroen? Anything I missed?
No, I think that's correct. I mean, maybe the talk to customers part is something to take more generally. Always take things step by step. Don't try to jump any steps scale, first nail things and then scale things. And always keep talking to customers, I would say also. I mean, like, what we felt is like we've been doing it very manually, sales, very close to customers for a long while, and then let it go over time. And now I'm just taking the reverse movement again, just to really keep understanding them very well, because that's what in many cases can make the difference. I read something like this on Twitter this morning. It was like that caring could be is easily a big competitive difference, like a differentiator. Just the fact that you really care about your customers. That can easily set you apart from many other companies, and staying close to your customers is the best way.
Right on. People want to get in touch with you, Jeroen. What's the best way?
It's via LinkedIn. They can connect with me, preferably leaving a message. Otherwise, I will probably not respond because I will have no idea where these people come from. But otherwise, if you type in a message that you are on a webinar and you would like to talk or something, connect, then I will connect with you. Perfect.
If anybody's curious about anything we talked about, you had questions, comments, you can shoot me an email, Collin with 2 L's at predictablerevenue.com. As a reminder, SalesFlare, the CRM company, why don't you give yourself a little plug there, Jeroen?
So if you're looking for something better than whatever sales CRM you're using, you're kind of tired of putting in the data, and you want something that does it for you, there's no other good alternative, I would say.
Right on. And here at Predictable Revenue, we're helping companies build remote sales teams. So if you're looking to build an SDR team, we're basically using all of our superpowers to, build one based out of our office in Cancun. And our goal is to make these SDRs feel like they work for you. And so we spend 4 months ramping them up, 5 months ramping them up, and then hand off, an SDR team that's already in flight so that your internal team can manage, and they feel like they're your people. All right, everybody, that's us for the webinar. Thanks so much. Really loved all the interactive comments, and thanks for joining us today. Jeroen, thanks for coming on the show, man. This was great.
Yeah, it was really great.
All right, see everybody.
That's good, everyone.